Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. The fallout continues from a chaotic Miami Grand Prix, with Lewis Hamilton revealing he told Fred Vasseur not to be so sensitive after his explosive radio remarks at the end of the Miami Grand Prix. In many respects, Hamilton was brought into this team to call out their deficiencies and try and help this team to actually become championship level yet again. If Vasseur is going to criticise Hamilton's remarks on this particular issue, then more Hamilton-Ferrari fallout chaotic moments are more than likely in the near future. Will anything change as a result of this? Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. This, by the way, is not a real quote. It is just a fabrication for the purposes of entertainment, but I thought it was pretty funny. Before we get to the drama, Jack Doohan, I mean this is drama, is likely to be gone. There's rumours before the season began he was going to get 5-6 Grand Prix. He has had 6 Grand Prix, and Abu Dhabi, of course, last year would make that 7. There was a feeling that he might be gone at some point. The rumour as of a few days ago was that no, he actually is going to get until the summer break. But the last Grand Prix, the last 2 Grand Prix, certainly this weekend wasn't even that bad. Obviously there was the drama in the sprint qualifying session where they sent him out and he wasn't very happy about that and all this. But in main quali he did quite well. But then the first lap of the race gets a bit optimistic down the inside, punctures his tyre, is out of the race immediately, right? So at a time where Williams are cooking, like really with gas, Alpine need to be scoring some points, and right now they just are not. So it's expected that Doohan, he's had his ups and downs, but he's not really on any weekends fully put it together. Looks like he's going to go. The race is saying that Doohan has been told that Colapinto's getting the drive, and that is set to happen imminently. So we'll see if confirmation of this arrives, but Doohan's time in F1 could be over already. I mean, look, before the season started, frankly, I expected Doohan to be the first man to go. Turned out it was Liam Lawson, right? Certainly in terms of the driver swap over there. But has Doohan done enough to earn to continue in the seat over Colapinto? I think you can maybe argue it, but I'm not really going to criticise this change too much if that's what they decide to do. Bit of other drama. After the race yesterday, Red Bull launched a protest against George Russell, trying to get him penalised for a 5-second penalty. Verstappen even said on the radio, check if George lifted. Now, George definitely lifted. He didn't lift much, for sure, but it was a single waved yellow flag. If it was a double waved yellow, the rules state you have to lift off and be in position to stop. A single waved yellow is merely you have to lift off and be in position to change direction. So as long as you notably lift off, even if your speed is still very high, it's fine, basically. And I think George was not, of the people that lifted off for this yellow flag, George actually lifted more than most did. So Red Bull tried. There was this great image of the Red Bull team. I don't know what Washay's laughing at. We've got Horner, we've got Toto staring each other down. We've got GP. Here's George. It didn't go anywhere, did it, right? So the penalty never happens that they looked for. There is this kind of conversation around, what do they say, discernible reduction in speed. So this was the debate really, right? Is that he lifted off, but his speed didn't, what you might argue, discernibly reduce. So, you know, that was kind of the crux of the debate here. But, you know, the rules seem to suggest if you lift off enough in a single yellow flag zone, such that the stewards are satisfied that you were in position to change direction if necessary, then they're happy with that. Had it been a double waved yellow, then yeah, 100% this would have been a penalty, but their protest did not go anywhere, so the result stands. And Russell stays P3, Norris stays P2, and Oscar Piastri stays P1. Only 82 fewer Grand Prix Piastri has done compared to Lando. Of course, it's a bit of a fraudulent stat, because Lando had many years driving, not a tractor, but certainly not exactly a race-winning car. Piastri now has 6 wins to Lando's 5. It's the big talking point of the weekend, apart from Ferrari, the current situation at McLaren and where we might go from here. I wanted to say a few words on Lando's reaction to the race because it was very controversial. This was Oscar Piastri, I think, taking the lead of the race when Max went too deep into the corner, locked up, and look, to be honest, Lando battled hard with Max and probably for a similar amount of laps to that Piastri battled with Max. But the battle between Piastri and Max was different to the Lando-Max battle. Why that was, you can debate it. You might argue that Lando can't drive as well against Max. You might argue that Max drives differently against Lando than he does against Oscar. I think my argument is more so that Piastri's racecraft against Max is just a little wiser. You know, he knows what Max is going to do, and he can take advantage of it, right? I mean, Max went super deep into the first corner, and Piastri is great at executing these switchbacks when Max goes too deep into a corner. Lando can do it, has done it, but doesn't maybe execute as well as he might otherwise do. Lando's had this tendency for the last couple of seasons to really try and go around the outside of the corner, and Max just isn't going to give you the room. This is the thing with Lando, is that he drives as if Max is going to give him the room. Whereas, I think we know full well that it's not going to happen. Now, this was the onboard of Antonelli when Verstappen clearly gets a bit of a snap. You can see here his rear tyres are giving way, Max. So he snaps to correct the oversteer moment, and that forces Lando off the track. Now, I mean, look, this is a very controversial moment, whether this should have been penalised or not. Look, technically, according to the rules, this is Max's corner here at turn 2, and Lando is not entitled to any space. So even though it was a snap of oversteer, I think, that eventually forced Lando off the track, this was fine according to the guidelines. Whether you think it should be or not is a question. My opinion is Lando should frankly know better. I know that this move is on, but Ted Kravitz said in his notebook that Andrea Stella had told the McLaren drivers before the Grand Prix they expected to have a car far beyond what anyone else could deliver. So he effectively told them, just bide your time, let the race come to you, and it's going to be an easy one too. You're not going to be struggling. Lando is a racing driver. Of course, in a situation like this, you're going to try and make the move happen. But I do think that if it was Piastri in this situation, maybe Piastri does the same thing, because it's so tempting to try and go around the outside here. Because, you know, the move is on. But you know what Max is going to do, whether he has a snap of oversteer or not. And let's be honest, people were saying, oh, well, it's a snap of oversteer, it's not Max's fault. It's like, well, he probably got the snap because he was carrying probably too much speed to ensure that he covered the corner, which he did. But I do think if it's Piastri there, he may be inclined in, round about here, as much as this move looks on, Norris, if he wants to, can just consolidate second here. And even he could maybe play a switchback to try and make a similar move like he did to Russell. That might not have been impossible either. But Lando goes around the outside, it doesn't work out for him, and we saw another moment as well later on when this was at the turn 1 incident where again Lando tries to hold it around the outside. You know that Max is going to put you on the curb here, which is what he does, and then Lando throws the middle finger up actually, which I thought was pretty entertaining. So lots going on yesterday. But I think the issue with Lando's racecraft compared to Oscar's, in my opinion, is that Lando does not use Max's aggression to his advantage. He actually, well, he allows Max to push him around in the way that he drives. And, you know, the option, what Piastri is currently doing against Max is he knows that if he gets a position on Max or if he's really pushing him, Max will probably go over the line in terms of trying to defend, in which therefore Oscar will hit a nice switchback or do something like that. But also Oscar's pretty patient with the moves. If Max is going to defend the inside, he'll try a thing or two to try and make it happen. He's not going to go for a crazy move around the outside. And Oscar is happy to say, look, I've got the best car, I will simply execute with the best car and be very consistent with it. Like Andrea Stella having told the guys before the Grand Prix, you've got a rocket ship, let's just let the race come to us, seeing Lando down to P6 after the first corner. You know, it's really an absolute nightmare. So it's difficult to look back on in some respects because, like, I can totally understand why Lando went for the move that he did at turn 1. But in hindsight, this race, according to McLaren, wasn't really a race with Max. They were pretty convinced they would get Max. So Lando had to be aware that really it was a race with his teammates, right? Like, okay, he was fighting Max first corner, but his teammate was still in P4. So all Lando had to do, really, and maybe Piastri would have done the same if the roles were reversed, slot into position, take second place, eventually get the lead, as Piastri eventually did, and win the Grand Prix from the front. That would have been, you know, in hindsight, the optimal solution here, right? And even Lando, when he made the comment about, you know, this is the way that it is with Max, it's either crash or don't pass, this was Oscar's reaction to it. You guys can see here that Oscar has a look over when Lando says this and says, I mean, yeah, this is Oscar's reaction. So we think, you know, we think he's agreeing. I mean, what do we think here, right? Like, this eyebrows raised, partially, I think this maybe means, wow, he actually said it, as in, maybe everyone's been thinking it, that Max goes over the line, but, like kind of eyebrows raised to say, wow, he actually did say that publicly, or whether Oscar's really thinking, damn, like, is that really true? Doesn't seem to be true for me, because I'm executing it in a better way. And even Lando went on to say this, Max is fighting hard and it's up to him to do that, but he ruined his own race. He's not racing very smart. He probably could have finished third today, and he didn't because of that. Now, the reality is he didn't finish third because the virtual safety car was poorly timed for Max. But look, for Lando to say that Max is not racing very smart, whatever you think about Max's approach, whether he's over the line, the context of his racing, Max is a 4-time world champion. Lando's a 5-time race winner, right? Like, you can't compare the two yet, and maybe never, right? So for Lando to say that Max isn't racing very smart comes across a little bit ironic when you look at the circumstances around yesterday's Grand Prix, and you could argue that actually no, Max did exactly what you might expect Max to do. Have a bit of fun in a car that clearly wasn't the fastest car, and defends with his life as if he stole the damn thing. That's what Romain Grosjean said. So maybe it's Lando who should be looking in the mirror and saying, you know what, against a car that I was a second a lap quicker than during the Grand Prix, maybe I could have handled it a bit smarter in the end. And obviously there's going to be debate on, well, does Max treat Lando differently to Oscar in the way that he races him? Sure, it does feel like that sometimes. But also I think that Lando, given the way that he races back, kind of encourages Max to operate the way that he does. Whereas Oscar encourages Max to drive a little bit, more carefully, because he knows that Oscar will not try the things that Lando tries and will just execute on the car advantage that Piastri has. It's tough for Red Bull right now. Marco says we've got to find some performance right away. It's depressing how quick the McLarens really are, going on to say that they will have an upgrade, but it's got to be a major upgrade, right? I mean, Marco basically says the Imola upgrade has to be good enough to challenge McLaren, because if it's not, then we're cooked, right? Maybe Spain is going to turn things around with the flexible front wings getting outlawed. Time will tell. But McLaren won the race 57 seconds ahead of the first Ferrari over a 57-lap race. That is as bad as it's really got under this current management, and, well, it's raising some serious criticism. The main drama, though, of yesterday, of course, was not necessarily that the car was bad. It was what the hell is going on at Ferrari operationally. These were Hamilton's comments. This is not good teamwork. That's all I'm going to say. You want me to sit here the whole race, and then they gave you they gave Hamilton the "we are checking," basically. In China, I got out of the way on a different road. Understood. We're going to swap the cars. You want me to let him past as well. So, what did he else say? Go for a tea break or whatever, lads, or something like that after you're done making this decision. So, very controversial incidents yesterday. And I think it's amazing how Ferrari managed to use team orders and make both drivers unhappy. So Hamilton comes up behind Leclerc on fresh medium rubber in their prime tyre life window at that point. They have him sit in the dirty air for 3 laps, burning up his tyres, and by the time they eventually make the swap, which wasn't even cleanly communicated either, Hamilton's tyres are not out of the optimal window anymore, and therefore he's struggling a bit to pull away and to catch up to Antonelli. Leclerc's tyres then come into their prime window on the hard later in the Grand Prix, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, Lewis, we're going to swap the cars around again. You couldn't catch Antonelli. But actually, no, he kind of was catching Antonelli at that point. So Leclerc was then on the radio saying, okay, well, if you don't want to swap, that's okay. If we're catching Antonelli, that's fine. And it seemed like at that point that they were. And then they told Leclerc that they were going to swap the cars, but actually they hadn't told Hamilton yet. So then Leclerc was like, well, hang on a second, this is kind of weird. Maybe we're just going to go for it like this. And then Hamilton was informed. He then swapped, and it was the worst of both worlds. Now, the thing is, Ferrari are going to tell you, Fred Vasseur is going to tell you that actually, no, this was fine. Because, well, they didn't lose any places. They were 7th and 8th. They had the team order swap. Bit of drama, but they finished 7th and 8th. So it's fine, right? Perfectly fine. It's like, hang on a second. Let's actually analyse the details here and realise that there were some serious errors of judgment and execution, again, on the decision-making front. And Hamilton was very adamant about the reason why he was so frustrated here. He says, look, guys, I want to win. I've still got the fire in my belly. I can feel a bit of it coming up right there. And, there will be updates in Imola. Vasseur says there will be updates, but it's about finding the best compromise of the car. We're going to get to more of Vasseur's comments in a second, because this was a pretty remarkable one. And again, you got to read this and think, man, Vasseur seemed like he struck me like a very reasonable team principal. But I don't know if Ferrari is like just a corrupting force or something, but it kind of feels that way. I mean, some of the top brass at Ferrari were there yesterday, and they see all this unfold. The car's terrible, the team orders are dramatic, Hamilton's fuming on the radio, so is Leclerc, calling out the way that the team are doing things. You know, the drivers aren't the issue in this conversation, and yet Vasseur is saying, well, yeah, we were 50 seconds off the win, McLaren was on another planet though, our pace was similar to Mercedes and Red Bull. So hang on a second, are you forgetting that you lost to a Williams? Like, let's just actually remind everyone of that fact today. That, okay, maybe you can come up with some metrics to argue that your pace was similar to Mercedes and Red Bull. I mean, obviously you're ahead of Yuki, but not compared to Max. But Albon was P5. Carlos Sainz, if he didn't have a bit of floor damage we think he might have had from the start of the Grand Prix, might have beaten you guys as well. I still believe in the potential of the car. We didn't maximise the balance. Here we go again. He's talking about the balance again. Like, can you believe it? So I fear that Fred Vasseur might, his brain might just be Ferrari mush inside now, and it might be all over. Anyway, look, this is the thing at Ferrari. Like, this is the way they operate as a team. You have to kind of toe the party line. That's how it's been for a very long time. And when Schumacher joins, with the entourage that eventually came in as well, he kind of instills the message at Ferrari that no, this current culture, this current setup is not a winning formula. And to be honest, the main reason, or one of the big reasons why Hamilton was signed, Vasseur even said it, was that he's going to help us become more of a winning outfit. So when Hamilton criticises what's going on internally, and maybe Leclerc could have been more ruthless with his criticism over the last 6-7 years, you've got to listen to him, because if you don't, then that just sends absolutely the wrong message to everyone, right? Because as Hamilton says, the car was coming alive when I put the medium tyres on. I lost a lot of time behind Charles. I was hoping we'd make a decision, not wasting time. I'm sure certain people didn't like certain comments, which maybe is talking about the top brass, because you know how it is at Ferrari, right? Like, criticising Ferrari, it's like a religion, so it kind of gets a little bit sketchy. But you've got to understand that it's frustrating. People say much worse things than I say. It was more sarcastic than anything. That's of course the last comment about letting Sainz pass. Obviously that was a joke, but he was obviously frustrated. I'm not frustrated now. We'll work on it internally. And he followed up as well and said I was just being sarcastic. If that was upsetting for them, then my apologies. So maybe there was a few words exchanged after the race to say, Lewis, don't be speaking in this way, obviously in an Italian accent, but you know what I'm saying. It was lighthearted, nothing serious. We keep pushing, he says. But this was the big comment of the day, really, that definitely has stirred up the most controversy. And Hamilton says this: Fred came to my room. So clearly Fred wanted a couple of words on what Hamilton had said on the radio, maybe finding it disrespectful or something. And Hamilton just sunned him and said, I just put my hand on his shoulder and was like, dude, calm down. Don't be so sensitive. I could have said way worse things on the radio. You hear some of the things that others have said in the past. Some of it was sarcasm. Look, you've got to understand you're under a huge amount of pressure within the car. You're never going to get the most peaceful messages coming through in the heat of the battle. It was fine, he says. But the idea that he went to Fred Vasseur, put his hand on his shoulder and said, look, buddy, like, don't be so sensitive, calm your horses, because it's all good. And it's very fascinating, right? And this is the Hamilton I think that we want to see. This is the Hamilton that we have seen in previous years. This is the kind of Hamilton-Ferrari meltdown that we were maybe expecting at some point, maybe not expecting 6 races into his new season. But you could totally get why Hamilton's frustrated. Whatever you think about Hamilton as a driver, whether he's as good as he was before, whether he's still capable of winning again, whatever car is delivered to him, this Ferrari predicament is clearly not a Hamilton problem. Obviously, it's a problem for him, but it's not a problem caused by him. It's fundamentally a Ferrari issue with their car, and then secondarily an issue with their strategy, operations, and all those factors again. So Fred Vasseur's coming into Lewis to say, look, we shouldn't say these words, and Hamilton comes out and says, look, I'm not going to apologise for the comments that I made. It's perfectly acceptable in Hamilton's opinion to say what he said and to double down on it in the way that he's doubled down on it. And as I said earlier, this is kind of the point, right? Fred Vasseur brought Hamilton in to say, look, you've won all these championships in Mercedes. Ferrari haven't won a championship in like 18 years. Lewis, what do we need to change? Where can we tighten up, right? And, I think it's an entire cultural thing. The problems that Ferrari had yesterday are not just indicative of that issue. They're also indicative, I think, of wider issues that are stemming still within the organisation to the present day. So that's pretty much my opinion of the day. We will close out just quickly with the drivers' standing. So Oscar Piastri's lead is now 16 points over Lando Norris. Verstappen is a further 16 points behind. Then Russell only 6 points back. Leclerc, Antonelli, Hamilton, Albon at 30 points, can you believe it? And Ocon and Lance Stroll are in the mix as well, can you believe that? This is the Constructors though, and if you add together the points that Mercedes have and the points that Red Bull have, you will get the points that McLaren have. So the Constructors' Championship is done as far as I'm concerned. There's just no way that McLaren don't win it, which maybe can be a good thing for the fans because hopefully it means that McLaren will not need to bother about team orders and they will simply let their drivers do the talking on the track. But very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.